Well, we're live.
All right.
So, Aaron, thanks for joining me.
You betcha. Appreciate you having me on for a little bit. I know it's
Yep.
middle of the summer. Everyone's busy. Obviously, you've been pretty busy, it seems like. So
Yep.
catch a little break and get this thing knocked out.
Yep. Pouring rain today, so it's a good day to get this stuff done.
Right.
So Aaron, some people maybe from social media or whatnot may have seen your stuff. You've been with the Breaking Point before. I think that's probably where people have seen you. Put a lot of good content on their YouTube channel. Maybe give the listeners a little bit of a background on you, growing up, how you got into hunting, how you got with those guys, and then into kind of the outdoor space, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. I think a lot of people know me from the Breaking Point TV. Great hunting shows with those guys for just over 6 years. And that's really where my, professional career started, behind a camera was with them. I went to UW Stevens Point for college, and Brennan and Mike, who own the Breaking Point, that's where they went. They're a little older than me, but I kind of ended up meeting a friend of a friend of a friend, and I was kind of already dabbling with, filming. I got a really good buddy of mine back home who's older than me as well, and he started taking me out in high school and filming some of my turkey hunts, and he had all of the top-notch, camera equipment, and I thought, man, that's pretty cool. And as a kid, that was my dream, was to hunt for a living, right? And as you got into high school, you could kind of figure out that you don't just hunt for a living. I mean, you got to have an avenue to
Mm-hmm.
get into it, and so that was my avenue that I seen was, hey, if you could, figure out how to run a camera, here it is. And so, going into college, that's kind of what I was doing, just kind of freelancing here and there, nothing crazy. And then, like I said, I just met the right person, and they knew Mike and Brennan, and so they said, hey, if you're ever interested in just coming out with us for a day or two, that was still when they were just real new into the interning deal. It wasn't anything special. It wasn't anything like they're offering now. I mean, they offer a really good gig to the younger guys now. But anyways, just started filming for them. Just still had a 9 to 5. When I wasn't in college, and the first fall, I said, hey, if you guys need somebody to go to North Dakota on a random weekend or whatever, and you don't have anybody, because they were both still working 9 to 5s, right when they had started. And sure enough, I was sitting at my job actually, and got a call. Didn't know who it was, and here it was Brennan, and he's like, hey man, it was like a Thursday, and I was actually working second shift at the time, and he's like, hey, can you be in North Dakota tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, I guess I'll just call in to work, I'll call in sick. And so I met him in Minneapolis, drove out to North Dakota with this guy that I'd never met, barely talked to him on the
Mm-hmm.
phone, and spent 2 nights in North Dakota, drove back, and then that turned into, I think it was 8 weekends in a row. We did the same exact thing. We'd both leave our 9 to 5 on a Friday, and we'd go out to North Dakota, drive through the night. We'd hunt Saturday, Sunday, turn around, come home, and then from that it just blew up into what it was, and they offered. I think the following year they offered me a full-time gig there, and it was an awesome gig. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I love those guys to death. Yet we still have a great relationship. Worked with them for 6 years, and then kind of about year four, we had the chance. A guy offered, said, hey, do you got anybody that would be interested in doing some bass fishing work? And again, I didn't even think bass fishing was nearly as big as it is, and I was just young, I was single, could travel, and I was like, yeah, what the heck, so started working for that guy, and that was pretty much, we worked for like 5 6 different companies and did their social media work, and then through that I met one of my best buddies now, Luke Palmer, who is a professional bass fisherman on the Bassmaster Elite Series. And it's funny, over a few beers I said, hey, you got, he's from southern Oklahoma. Of course my head's deer hunting, so I'm like, hey, you got deer hunting ground where you live? He's like, oh yeah. He's like, my parents live on like 500 acres. And I'm like, huh. I'm like, how about this? I'm like, how about let's trade some work here for some deer hunting ground? He's like, yeah, I don't care. So ended up hooking up with him, and did some work for him the first year just on the side, for free. And he let me come down and killed an awesome buck the first year, and that's where our friendship really grew. And then fast forward, started working with him full time while I was still working at the breaking point. And that year I was gone, like literally, I think we put it on the calendar. It was like 11 months I was gone from home. I was home like the month of January, and then I was back on the road fishing after hunting season. And it was, that was what, 2 years ago, and I was just getting wore out. I'm like, man, I still have friends, I still have family back home, I still want my downtime, to snowmobile, to just do odds and ends stuff. And so then that was when it kind of came down to the point where it's like, okay, you got to make a decision here to stay with the hunting, go with the fishing. And so I decided to go with the fishing stuff. And the reason I did that was not just because I was, fed up with the hunting or anything like that. I still love hunting. I think about 365 days a year. I still watch their hunting show. I'm still close with those guys. It was just, if I could free up my falls to still hunt, but still have a full-time gig the rest of the year, that's, what I wanted to focus on. And getting, I was pushing 28 years old at the time and wanted to settle down, have a family, have kids. That kind of was where my mind was at, and that's kind of what I did just to free up some time. So now, some people probably know me from the fishing side. I've been on the bass fishing side now for 4 years. Do Luke's stuff exclusively from about February to August. Travel the country with him yet, and then it led us to this. So then during that last summer, I was sitting there going, okay, now I have something full time, but I still have my falls open. Be nice to bring in some money during the fall and still have time to hunt. And so that's where I came up with the drone deer recovery service, which is called LTL, Drone Deer Recovery Service. Stands for Life Through the Lens, because I still do obviously all my camera work, but then obviously finding deer through the lens of the drone. So that has just, it's been a blessing in disguise. And literally I thought about it 1 month, and the next month I'm dumping money into a whole new gig, and it's been pretty awesome.
And that's kind of why I wanted to get you on, because I've had experience. I've actually worked with you last fall on a recovery. Yep. Had no experience prior to that with drone recovery. I mean, I've seen it. There's a couple of big YouTube channels that are pretty popular right now, have been for the last couple of years. It's getting, states are legalizing it. But I kind of wanted to have you on because there's a lot of questions that maybe could be answered for people that maybe have yet to hear about it. Sure. Or at the same time, they're not all on board with the technology side of it and maybe understanding how it works, what goes into it. I know a couple of pilots now other than you, just because they started doing it now, and all of them, they're good guys. They're doing it for the right reasons. And I think those guys need to be the ones, advocating for it, answering the questions, the guys that are doing it the right way. So to lead into that, what maybe attracted you other than, something to do in the fall, money-wise? What kind of led you into thinking about, or just, doing the drone recovery? I know a lot of guys, it seems like the first time they see it, the first time they see somebody run one or do a recovery, they're like hooked, and then they want to do it. Or like, they're like, oh, this is what I'm doing anytime we need a recovery. Instead of going the dog route, they're all on board with the drone. So did you have like an experience that you've used one for a recovery, or how did you kind of get interested in it?
I did not actually have any experience. I never called one in. I guess my biggest thing when I was looking into it and doing research on it is just the simple fact that, being with the hunting show, you've been on how many tracks and how many recoveries and things like that, where I feel like I've seen just about every scenario, right? I mean, we hunted all over the country, numerous guys on the teams. You're always, seemed like you're always on tracks, and it was always different scenarios, whether it be a gut shot deer, liver shot deer, shoulder shot deer. I mean, you've seen everything, and you learn from that. You learn just to track, as a person. You didn't bring dogs in or drones. A lot of times we're in a state where none of that was legalized. So it was just down to us, and it might have came down to, I remember in Kansas one time, Brennan shot one a little back, and, here we are at midnight, 1 o'clock, and I'm on my hands and knees crawling around just looking for one drop of blood here, because we knew the deer was dead. Liver shot, it was back, but it was just, you knew, hey, this thing's dead somewhere, we need to find it, and I think a lot of those instances played into, hey, like if I could offer a service to somebody that has exhausted their efforts. They say, hey, you know what? We have gone out, we've looked for blood, we've lost blood, or, you know, maybe it's in cattail marsh or something where it's very hard, or CRP grass where it's hard to depict blood when them deer get in there. But they know the deer's dead, but they don't know what else to do, right? And so they call in a dog, or they call in this drone, and it's new yet to the industry. You know, it's been around now for 4 or 5 years, I'd say, and a lot of guys are starting to get into it, but it's still relatively new. And me, with the experience of flying drones already, you know, for videography and stuff like that, I was like, why not give this a shot, you know? And I've always been that person. The guys at Breaking Point would tell you, you know, I didn't get on with them and all of a sudden I'm in front of the camera 90% of the time. You know, I ran the camera, and the reason for that was I'm the type of guy that I am going to get probably more enjoyment out of filming you shoot a deer than if it was me in front of the camera. And a lot of times it sounds dumb, but a lot of times you don't find that in a lot of people, because obviously everybody wants to be in the starlight. They want to be shooting the deer, putting that big buck on the wall. But for me, there was something about it that when I was with Brennan, he shot a giant, man. I was, you know, just as happy, if not more happy, you know, drinking Busch Lights and partying afterwards, and just being that excited around that, and not even, you know, that buck's going on Brennan's wall. I may never see it for 4 or 5 years or whatever the case may be, but knowing that I was a part of it and was there for it always gave me that drive to go on the next hunt. And it's been true with the drone recovery. You know, there's nothing better than showing up and a guy is, you know, man, I've done everything I can to find this deer and I just can't, but I feel like he's dead. And in 5 minutes of the drone being in the air, I'm like, yep, there he is, you know, and then they go nuts and I'm just excited, you know. It's pretty cool. And that's kind of why, you know, I wanted to get into it, is just for that satisfaction of seeing, you know, my clients happy after they, you know, because you know how it is. You go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. And if I can bring you back to that high, there's nothing better.
Right. I'm kind of the same way, where I would much rather just be a part of the track, you know, getting that text message from a buddy or your dad or somebody close to you that maybe taught you to hunt. And then I'm getting to the point now where I would much rather get my dad on a deer, and whatever size it is, doesn't matter. I just want to see him. It's kind of reverse roles. He was that way when I was younger. Now it's like, I want to see him kill as many deer while he can as possible. And I'll take good pictures for him and video it or whatever, but I'd much rather do that.
Yeah.
It seems like, with age anyways. But maybe talk a little bit more about that experience, like you finding someone's deer. Have you shared tears with people? Have they, you know, like,
You
I
know,
feel like people are pretty emotional in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, one track just sticks out to me because it was kind of like that, you know. Showed up for this guy. He actually knew me from back home in the Appleton area where I grew up, and his kids played baseball with my younger brother and whatever. So he called me up and said, hey, you know, I shot a buck. It's not a big buck, but it's been 15 years since I shot one, and, you know, everything happened so fast. And he said, you know, we've looked all morning and can't find it, but it's in kind of longer grass. You know, it's just, I've exhausted all my efforts. I said, that's not a problem. And I was actually just leaving a track, and I said, listen, I said, I can come right now, which is like midday. I said, the problem with that is it's, you know, pure sun out. Thermals are kind of high, but I said, you know, it was right like first week of November. So I said, but you're also in peak season, so I have tracks starting to back up. I said, so what I could do is I could come out there, you know, I could search for an hour, and if we don't find anything, I'll come back when the thermals are right. But I said, listening to what your ground looks like, I probably got a good chance. And so I show up there, and he literally had like a group of buddies with him. And he's like, I said, all right, pull up Onyx, you know, just so I can see, you know, where you had last blood, whatever. Okay, pulled it up, and I put the drone up, and I literally flew to where he had last blood, and I kind of started laughing. I'm like, he's laying right there. And he's like, what? I'm like, he's laying, I don't know, 5 yards from where you had last blood. And I could see it plain as day, pure sun. He's like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, nope. So I show him, I punch in with the normal camera. He's laying there dead as a doornail. And he just lost his mind, you know, just jumping up. All of his buddies are high-fiving. They're high-fiving me. And it literally took me like 37 seconds with the drone to find that deer. But he was just ecstatic. Like, literally, I was like, you guys, you go and then get him. I'll wait. You come back out. And they brought him out and taking pictures, and they were, drinking beers. And we just hung out for like 30 minutes. And he kept hugging me and high-fiving me. And, it's like, he's at his mid-40s and, just wound up like he shot a 200-inch deer, and it wasn't anything, it wasn't tiny, but it wasn't huge.
Right.
But just to see that emotion, because he was just down in the dumps when I showed up. He's like, man, first, nice buck that I've killed or had a chance to in years, and now I can't find it. I'm like, you'll be all right, we'll give this some time. And then literally 37 seconds is all it took me to find it. So it was pretty cool.
It's got to be pretty rewarding too, because like you said, you're getting to that point kind of just like me, where it's like you want to see other people have success, because I haven't really been there, done that, but you kind of have in a sense. You've hunted a lot all over the country for, years. And I think just being able to, every single person you go to, you have a chance of being part of that experience and, riding that high. And, it's just a good feeling probably.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
If that's the best part of it to you, and then you get to do that, every day throughout season almost, it's like, be pretty fun, I feel like.
Well, it's, and it comes down to, like, literally, I told you before I jumped onto here, I think I hunted 6 days last year, besides Oklahoma. I went down there and hunted for about 5 days, but other than that, around the Midwest, I hunted 6 days last year. And people are like, you went from hunting almost every day of the season all over the country to hunting 6 days. Does that bother you? And I said, absolutely not. Because I get the satisfaction I used to get from killing a big deer or filming a big deer get killed, to now, like you said, just about every day, if not, every day during peak season, I'm out getting that satisfaction of finding deer for people, and it makes everything come full circle.
Yep. I just kind of want to bring that up, kind of backtrack a little bit from your last point about your process maybe of doing, a recovery. You said it took 37 seconds. I'm the opposite of against dogs. I'm not here to say that drones are better than dogs. I know a lot of really good dog handlers that have spent their life doing that.
Yep.
And I don't want to throw any shade at them at all, but just from what I've seen from drone recoveries, like, even if it was at Last Blood where that client that you had, you kind of talked about,
Yep.
There's no way, between unloading, doing all this stuff with a dog, it would have probably been at least over an hour versus
100%.
a minute.
And that's like you hit it perfectly. I'm a drone operator, but I'll never shame on the dogs. The dogs have their time, and we'll kind of get into that later probably in the podcast. But, as far as me, once you call me, I'll kind of run you through what happened. So you call me up. I'll be at my house yet, 3 hours away or whatever, but you call me, I will run you through a lot of questions. And it sounds dumb, but I want to know everything I can before I even really make not that I'm not going to come, okay? Not that I'm not going to show up, but before I even leave the house, I want to know, my first questions are, okay, do you know what kind of shot it was? Were you able to see, hey, I hit him forward, I hit him back, I hit him high, I hit him low? Because those are that's a big question to how I go at, how I approach it. And then, then I'll go into, okay, what kind of topography are we dealing with? Do you have rolling ridges, high ground, low ground, cattail swamps, cedar swamps, because that is all part of, in my head as I'm driving to your property, okay, how am I going to tackle this? Because depending on the topography and what you have for foliage and all this stuff really tells me, okay, I need to really slow down on my search, or, if it's wide open CRP, okay, well now I may be able to cover this a lot faster because there's not a lot of trees, there's not a lot of cover in the way. So that's another thing I'll ask you. Obviously, location, obviously I got to know where you're at. Then I ask you, when did you shoot him? Did you shoot him an hour ago? Are you still in the stand, which has happened? I've had guys call me and they're still in the stand. Or did you shoot him last night and you guys went out and looked? and then you couldn't find them. Now you're calling me, because again, that all plays into my strategy on approaching the track, because it's all different. If you get a guy that says, hey, yeah, we went out last night, we thought it was a good shot, got on blood, and we think we may have bumped him. Okay, well, now instead of me planning on that track being in a 300 to 400 yard radius, now we might be out to that mile radius because you may have bumped him and that deer's going to run away. It's all different game plans to how I approach things. I'm trying to think of other ones, which I'm sure I'll think of them, as we go. But that's kind of the starting point. Like I said, the shot placement is obviously critical because, to be honest with you, I've had guys that'll call me and say, hey, I know I straight shoulder shot this deer. What do you think? And I'm like, well, it depends, right? Because do you know how much penetration did you have? Was the arrow barely in his shoulder, or did you have, that 5-6 inch range where you think, hey, maybe you got in there and still got his heart? Or, was it way high shoulder? Because if it's way high shoulder, you're really flirting with probably not getting it. And I'll tell guys straight up, like, I'm not here to take your money and show up just to not find him, or find him and say, hey, man, he's going to be fine. He's just going to have a good limp for a while. I want you and I to be, coming into every track hoping for the highest rate of success. So, I had a guy last year reach out to me and say, hey, I shoulder shot one, high shoulder, not much penetration. What would you do? And I said, honestly, I'm not here to take your money, man. I said, I can come out there and look, but from what you've told me already, you're not very confident in it. Like, you're just banking on pretty much devil's advocate. Like, maybe we'll get lucky and he'll be dead. But I said, I would go out there, look like you normally would, see if you can get enough blood to track him. And maybe, if he's going to be dead and I'm going to find him with a drone with a shot like that, you're probably going to be able to find him. But if not, 90% of the time with a high shoulder shot like that, not much penetration, that deer's going to be all right. And you're going to end up getting pictures of him to confirm it. It's not like he's going to take off and leave and he's never going to come back. I mean, he's going to heal up and that went a long ways with that guy, because like he said, he's like, well, I just figured you'd tell me, I'll come out and look and take my money. I'm like, no, I'm not in it for, I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the success. I want to come find your deer and I want it to be dead, and that's just the way I am. I'm not out here to say, oh yeah, well, his shoulder shot, yeah, he's probably dead. Like, no, I've seen enough shoulder shots. I've had enough shoulder shots to tell you that it's not
a high percentage. Yeah.
So.
I think we could dig a little bit deeper into kind of what you were talking about as far as, like, I think it's important that people get vetted in this space too. There's a lot of guys trying to do that. That started really early. I know that you're on some of them on Facebook. You can probably find them online now. I think they've come out with websites where if you're a client, you have a deer that's wounded and you're looking for a drone, you can either go on the forum on Facebook or online. I know Wisconsin has multiple because they've been one of the early states that's, legalized it. It's just like a dog tracking forum, if anyone's familiar with that. You go on there, it's got the pilot's information, their number, email. A lot of them now have a rundown of their whole setup and how long they've been doing it, how many tracks they've done, their success rate, some of them even have. And I think that's good to do because I know you're doing it the right way, and you can tell just by the way you can articulate everything and just your professional nature and everything. But I think people need to take a second, slow down, take some time and think about it. Like you said, gather that information, because the pilots should be asking all those questions before they drive out. And just make sure you're getting someone that, you can trust. And I would imagine you probably work with other pilots and have a handful of guys like, oh, I can't make it out. I know this guy, give him a shout. Like 100%. A lot of you guys work together. A lot of you good guys that are doing it the right way all kind of come together and are doing it for the right reasons. And you want to find people's deer, so you work together. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you hit it right on the head. I do work with a couple guys. I was lucky enough to just meet a couple of the guys. Lance Rossing, he's out of like Monroe area, Wisconsin, Janesville area. Wyatt Barber's another really good kid, and that's us three pretty much. We will, just like you said, shoot calls off of one another, because there's times during peak season that honestly you could have 5, 6, 7 calls in a night or a day, and you just can't get to all of them because you might have one that's over here on the southeast part of the state, and you got one on the western side, and then you have 3 others in another area, and process of elimination. Hey, I'm going to go do the 3 that are in one area that I can actually get to in a reasonable amount of time. So I'm going to call Lance and say, hey, you want this one on the western side if you're not busy? Oh, yeah, thanks, And you go back and forth. But to hit on another important thing that I tell people a lot, and, I can't talk from years of experience, but being in the hunting industry, you learn, like you said, who to trust, who knows what they're doing. And Wisconsin is a state that has, I think the last time I looked at the app or whatever we use for drone operators and Facebook and things like that, it's up over 50 some drone operators, I think, in Wisconsin that are insured, and we're running a business. But out of the, I will say that I tell people, like you said, you have to do your research. You don't want to just call a guy because he's 10 minutes from you, because what'll happen is, and this is in any industry, whether it's the fishing industry, hunting industry, whether it's drones or just deer hunting, whatever the case may be, they got the money laying around, let's buy a drone, let's go do this tracking thing, and they might not have any deer hunting experience background. It is another company that they want to start because it's just another way that they have income coming in. Problem with that is yeah, anyone can fly a drone with practice, right? They're not hard to fly. I will say that. They're not hard to fly. They're not hard to switch back from thermal to normal camera, all that kind of stuff. But what I strive for and what I look at when I'm doing a recovery is, let's say I'm out and I'm on a track and, we thought, oh, this is going to be an easy track, but I can't find it, okay? I'm flying for an hour and I can't find it. Now my head starts to spin. Not because I'm nervous, but my head starts to go back to all of those tracks I've done before a drone, right? You had no other resource. You needed to find this deer on your own. So you started going through your head and saying, okay, if I was a gut shot deer, where am I going? If I was a shoulder shot deer, where am I going? Am I going for water? Am I going back to the bedding area that I came from? Am I making a big loop? That doesn't make any sense to the normal average Joe out there. But you almost have to think like a deer. And it sounds stupid, but that's what you have to do. And I feel like the majority of your drone operators that just pick this up as a side gig and more income are not going to do that. They are going to come out. They are going to say, hey, we're going to give you an hour. If I haven't found your deer, that shucks. That sucks. They're going to take your money and on to the next track they go. For me, it is impossible for me to do that. I have gotten yelled at by my girlfriend because she's like, you have been at this track for 2 hours. And I'm like, yes, because I don't want to give up on it. Because depending on what the scenario is, I know this deer is dead. I just need to figure out where this deer is dead. And then that's where I start playing things in my head. And a perfect example, last year I had it happen to a T. Actually the guy that got me into the whole filming thing, we have a buddy that was diagnosed with MS at a real young age, and so he shoots a crossbow, and they know their property super well. It's not a huge property, so he shot a really nice buck, and my buddy called me up and said, hey, he gut shot him. He knows it for a fact, and we know where he went. So just take your time, come up in the morning, early morning, and we'll find it. Okay. So I show up, and we literally figured we knew where this deer was going because they've shot numerous deer and they always go to this bedding area. So I go fly there for literally 40 minutes all around. I can't find it. I go fly where he shot him, can't find it. And the instinct kicked in, and I said, where did this deer come from? And he told me, and this is first week in November, he was hot on a doe. And he said, well, he come from across the creek. And I said, okay. So I started in my head making a map that if a deer were to get hit and loop through that one bedding area, where is he going? He's probably going to try heading back to where he came from because he knew he was safe there. So I flew literally that pattern, and as I'm flying that, heading back towards the creek, he was dead right there. Now, not saying, somebody that didn't have hunting background couldn't have found that deer eventually, but playing that in my head, it worked to a T. And I told my buddy right then and there, I said, this is the stuff that you will not find with just an average drone operator, because he would have went and flew where you told him, hey, this deer's got to be here. He would have went and flew where you shot. And that would have been it. He's an hour in. He might have to go to another track, or he's got family obligations, or whatever the case may be. But he would have said, hey, man, we looked. He must not be here. You guys can go look if you want, but that's it. And that would have been it. He'd have taken your money. He's out the door. So I think that's a huge thing to hit on as far as when you're looking for a drone operator. And I get it. A lot of people don't, might not know, hey, Aaron's a drone operator and he's good at it, or, he has a lot of knowledge behind hunting. But just do some research. Look at the guy's Facebook page. Does he have a lot of posts of finding deer? Is he out this time of year, practicing, doing flights, I'm out probably 2-3 times a week just flying, hey, okay, I'm flying. I mean, trees are loaded with leaves right now. It's very hard to see deer in the timber. But I'm training my eye to pick up that little blip, that little blob, or whatever the case may be, to just train your eye to see different things. And, something as simple and as stupid as it sounds, but depicting, what a rabbit on a thermal looks like compared to a raccoon, compared to a small deer, a fawn, to, hey, that's, before I even click on it, I know it's going to be a mature deer just by the way the thermal looks. Just those small things, because on a track, that minute that I punch in on something because it has thermal, when I know as an operator, well, we can bypass that because that's going to be a rabbit, because it's tiny compared to what I'm looking for in a deer. That's all time saved for me and for the hunter standing there, oh gosh, I hope I find my deer. Well, if I go out and I fly for an hour, but I spend 30 minutes of it looking at raccoons and rabbits and, turkeys or whatever the case may be, that's all time that's taken away from us actually looking for that deer. So that's why I kind of go out and I do these quote unquote practice missions, is just to figure out what I'm looking at. And that way, I always tell clients when I show up, hey, if you see something on the screen, you tell me, because I might not see it, just because I'm looking at other things or whatever. And once I look at it, when you tell me, I can say, nah, that's all right. That's going to be way smaller than what we're looking for. But I know you're looking just as hard as I am, and I appreciate that. But if I say, okay, yeah, show me everything, and then we go over there and we punch in on a spotlight and it's a raccoon in the tree. And that's the weird thing too, is after doing this a while, I can tell whether they're in a tree, they're on the ground, they're 15 feet in the tree, just because I've flown so much that I can tell the difference in, how far they are,
Right.
height and above ground level and all that stuff. So,
And I can speak firsthand too. I kind of talk about my track that I had you do last year about both of those things, just like someone's knowledge prior to, how many blood trails they've followed, how many deer they've been on, how many tracks they've been on, and just understanding the terrain and how deer like to move too in different terrain. Because, like you kind of said, just training your eye. And I think by the time you unloaded your stuff during my track, we covered, I don't know, a 40-acre big thick bottom in 15 minutes. And you kind of were doing that same thing, like you said. You're like, oh, that's a group of does, that's a doe and a fawn. And I mean, you weren't even, you're 400 foot up, just little blips on the screen on the thermal, and you're like, nope, those are does. I mean, we've seen multiple other bucks, just doing their thing, being at night, and it was during the rut, so they're running around. You do a swath one way, and you come back, those deer are running. They could be halfway across that bottom already, and then being able to pick out, oh, that's a buck, that's a doe, without even zooming in or putting the light on them.
Yep.
It was pretty impressive to just see how that works. And you could tell that you've done a ton of them just by, you know, what you did there.
Yep.
And I think we found what we thought was my deer that ended up not dying. I had pictures of them a week later on that same piece, but we found them in probably 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was kind of one of those things where just understanding how wounded deer like to move. So just to kind of lay out the piece a little bit without giving too much away, it was like a bigger, thicker bottom with a decent size creek running through it, or a river. It was pretty deep. I don't know that you'd want a person could cross it without, you know, a boat, or it moves pretty good. But a deer, I think, could definitely cross it if it wanted to get across enough. So most people are like, oh, it's a moving water, deer's not going to want to cross that or whatever. But just the way that it laid out, the deer ended up making a big loop, which we kind of figured after tracking him on foot twice before calling you. He made a big loop around close to the road, and then he just used this little fence row, or this little high ground, going from one patch of woods on the high ground down towards the river. And you could just see when you pulled up the map, he just made a big J hook around, used the high ground right through the middle of the bottom, right, you know, looking at it on foot, you're like, a deer wouldn't go right across that open like that. And right towards the river, where most injured deer, that's what kind of, you know, has your hopes a little higher. You know, usually pretty fatally wounded deer head towards water. That's just something that a lot of people know that.
Yep.
But so you kind of use that J hook that he was, you know, I had it marked out from on foot, kind of follow that right straight towards, and we found him. He did end up crossing the river, which, without understanding what deer are capable of and what they like doing, it would have took, you know, a dog, I don't know, hours on that track probably, or a long time.
Wow.
Just because it crossed water. So then you have to deal with that, trying to get across and picking it up on the other side if they even get sent on the other side.
Yep.
But
Yeah, and I will
think
say,
it was,
you know, to hit on dogs too. I honestly, you know, Wisconsin opens middle of September every year. A big thing I tell guys is that first part of the year is your time to put your trust in dogs. Not saying that us drone operators can't find deer, but our success rate is a lot lower that time of year because of the foliage on the trees. The trees are so thick, it's very hard to really dissect a piece of ground. Where a dog, you call them in that time of year, obviously they're going off scent and they can peel their way through there, and they can probably find them on, you know, at a quicker rate, and, you know, be more successful that way. And that's why I say, you know, I don't hate on dogs. You call them whatever time of year you want to use them. But from what I've seen, that first, you know, about month-ish, you know, unless your ground lays out weird, you know, a lot of CRP or your cattail marsh or things like that where we can, you know, leaves don't matter. But where leaves are a big factor, the dogs they still have their timing, right? But as soon as those leaves start dropping and that foliage comes off, it is night and day.
it's no comparison, really. It's no comparison.
I have no shame in saying that the dogs will fall off the map at about middle of October, because from middle of October to January, when your season is over, the drones can cover so much ground in so much, you know, way less time, and we can see everything. Like,
How many tracks do you think you've been on in the last, you did it for one full season?
one full season. I did 40 tracks right on the head last year. So,
Okay. And what was your average on the ones that you think that were fatally hit and you ended up finding dead? Even, I guess that doesn't even really matter. Finding them bedded, not dead yet, in their first bed, probably about the same kind of time frame. But what do you think your average flight time was for those?
Flight time, if I'm finding them dead or alive in their bed, is under 30 minutes. Every one of them. And that's not me being like, well, I shouldn't say it. I had one. Okay, this is one that should be talked about because it actually blew my mind. So I had a guy call me up. He had shot the deer 2 days prior of him even calling me. Said, crossbow shot. I know it was a gut shot. He hunched up, walked off. I know. And I said, okay, well, that deer's dead. He said, the problem is we went and looked for him, couldn't find him, and it has now rained for 2 days straight. Temperatures are about low 40s during the day, getting down to, mid 30s at night. And he said it's literally nonstop rain for 2 days. What do you think? And I said, to be completely honest with you, if this was just a straight up no rain involved, I'd say not a problem. I'll come find him. He'll be dead, and I'll find him pretty easily. So the rain is what I don't know what that does with their thermals. I haven't done it long enough, and I'm going to be straight up honest with you, But I said, I am confident that if you want me to come out there, I will do everything in my power to find this deer because I know he's fatally hit. Straight up gut shot. He's going to be dead. He said, well, why don't you come out? So I literally showed up. It was still raining. It wasn't like a downpour, but we're talking 2 days later.
And you can fly in the rain with your equipment.
Yeah, I can fly in the rain. And so I showed up, and where I was going with this is the one that didn't fall under that 30-minute time frame. So I flew for about 40 minutes, and I was like, are you sure this is where you're at? Or I said, I know it's night, and at nighttime, for people that aren't used to the technology, it's very hard to look at your property from aerial on a thermal camera and know exactly where you're at. It's very weird when you're not used to looking at it. So I brought it back and I pulled up Onyx. I said, show me right where you're at. He said, I was right here. I said, well, that's not where you have been telling me that you were at. I said, okay, so he ran off into this valley. Yep. So I literally took the drone, I flew to that valley, and I found him in about 3 minutes. And he was still glowing. His thermals were still as hot as if I'd found that deer an hour after he shot him. And he was laying in the downpour rain and 40-degree temperatures for 2 days before I found him.
And you have to think about, I think it's important to, and I think I've seen this like just by watching other people's YouTube videos on recoveries, just because it's interesting to watch. Yeah. But there's been a couple I've seen where it seems like, and I'm no expert or anything, so I don't want to speak on anything, but in absolutes, but it seems like I've seen guys find deer weeks later that are, because every single day, even if it's overcast, there's some sunlight coming through, and that carcass will absorb that heat, and it just stays in that carcass more than it would in, say, a rock or any grass or whatever. Like after 30 minutes after, or even less than that, after sundown, that stuff's all cold, whereas that's going to hold it most of the night, at least a little bit. So that's just going to stand out.
Usually what I tell people if they call me, I usually, from what I've seen and learned and done research on, I try to tell people within 4 days is usually about my max that I'll have confidence in, right? But like you're saying, I have been on numerous tracks where I show people this, where I might find a deer, it's up feeding in a field or whatever, and I'll go fly over a waterway, and I'm like, you see that right there? That's its bed. It just got out of probably 15, 20 minutes ago. And they're like, what? I'm like, because that clump of grass there is holding heat, and it looks like a bedded deer, but it's not. But that's where that deer was just laying, and that, who knows how long he was laying there, but its body temperature was heating that ground enough compared to the air, and that's why that thing still has a heat signature. So it's pretty crazy to see the thermals when it comes down to that.
Yeah. So I think at this point, you kind of touched on it before, but why don't you kind of run down the equipment you use? And I know you run like top of the line stuff, kind of give your equipment rundown. And then from the second after you talked about it before, a client answers those questions and you're like, okay, I'm coming out and meet you here this time. Go through your process on like a average track just the whole way through, and then run down your equipment so people can kind of get an idea.
Yeah, so the drone I use is called the DJI M30T. So it was literally the cream of the crop, and I say was because they literally just dropped a brand new one. It's called the DJI 4T. So it's supposed to be just a newer version of mine. But up until then, it was, and it's still really good. I mean, there's pros and cons to even the new one to mine, but that's the one I run. I hook it up with it's called a JZ T30, I believe, or T20 spotlight on top of it. Comes with a remote, and then batteries, a charging system that you need specifically for those batteries. And then that battery system, I have a Predator generator, so it's quiet, so that way you can still talk when you're on a track. And that's obviously for once I run through a set of batteries, I put it in the charging station, fire up the generator, it's constantly charging my battery, so I will never run out of battery life. As soon as, like, literally it's down to pretty much when I'm done flying, the next two batteries are already charged and ready to go. So there is no waiting time on that. I do run a LCD screen. I think it's a Lenovo, so I think that's a 16 by 11 external monitor. Reason I do that is because instead of having people watching over my shoulder while I'm running the remote and looking at my LCD screen, it's hooked in with an HDMI cable to an external monitor that sits on my tailgate. And it's literally like you're watching TV, but you can see literally everything that I can on my remote. It just transfers right to that screen, and you can sit there with 5 of your buddies, and
You can grab a lawn chair, sit down, and just watch the show,
exactly,
essentially.
you can sit there. One upgrade I just made, actually, I put a setup in my truck, so that screen now will, like, if we have weather or it's cold out, later in the year, instead of flying outside, we'll fly from right into the truck, because I don't want to be cold and I don't want you to be cold. So this screen will literally sit right up on the dash, and literally have a front row seat to the search. But yeah, that's pretty much the setup I run. Pretty simple. Nothing too crazy. You can go, obviously, dronedeerrecovery.com has a bunch of, extras that you can get, an actual, big deal where, the screen sits in a big protective case and all this stuff, and they have actual generators you can buy through them. And if that's what you want to do, great. I just took the way easier route, the more, less expensive route, just because I know what works, and it's all worked great. And then what else did you want me to touch on? Oh yeah,
Just maybe like a mock track.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of did it before already, but like,
Yeah.
just like your average, like you said, 20-minute track, like you kind of go where they said, you find the deer dead right away, and kind of just explain from when you get there, talk to them, and kind of your order of operations, maybe.
For sure. So, yeah, you call me up, you give me answers to all my questions. I said, yep, ready to rock and roll. I'll meet you there. So once I meet you at your property, usually I say, hey, okay, can we get anywhere closer, let's say, to where you were hunting? That's not gonna, I don't want to intrude. Like, if it's, you're talking first week in November, if you got other guys hunting your property, I don't want to go in there and get too close and it's messing up their hunt. But that's usually my first thing. Where can we fly this thing from? Do you have an open area? Do you have, is your cabin tucked back in the woods and we can fly right from there? Great, whatever. So that's my first question usually. Once we get that figured out, then my first thing on every track is, what do you use for an app? Nowadays everybody has a phone app, whether it's Onyx, Base Map, you name it. I mean, somebody is always using some kind of app. A lot of it is Onyx. That's what I use. I've used it for years. So I usually will have you pull up Onyx, and that's when I say, okay, show me where you shot this deer. I don't care where he ran at this point. I just want to know where you shot him. And then they'll tell me, okay, yeah, this is where it was. Okay, now where did he run? And if you have already looked for him, where was your last blood? And a lot of guys nowadays are tracking on a blood track. They're tracking themselves, so they'll have a track laid down and they'll show me, okay, this was last blood. The reason I do that is because this is all shortening up flight time, right?
You already know where they've been, so you can kind of cross that out, maybe.
So I can kind of cross that out, and it gives me a starting point, obviously. I don't have to, let's say this spot is 700 yards away from where I take off. I don't have to search that 700 yards to get to where you shot that deer. That X's that off.
And you will, if you don't find anything, you will go back and look at that area. You're just trying to speed up the whole process, because process of elimination.
Right, 100%. And so then I get back there, and that's when I start doing my search. But I will say this, depending on what you already answered as far as shot placement and stuff like that goes, then that's what tells me, okay, where do I start my radius? Do I start my radius, oh man, this, it's a shoulder shot deer, we got to really broaden the search out. Or, hey, I thought I double lunged this deer, I ran out of blood. Okay, well, he's probably here somewhat close. So now I'm going to, bring my horizon, it's going to be a lot smaller, right? So then I just start gridding. And depending on topography is how I grid. If it's thick timber, I'm going to go down one way and I'm going to come back the other way, because I've seen it numerous times that you might go down one way and not see anything, and you come back and he sticks out like a sore thumb because he was laying behind a brush pile or he was tucked up against a tree, and when you flew by the one way it didn't pick him up, but you came back the other way and it looks like whoa, where'd that deer come from? The moral of the story was that deer was laying there in the same exact spot. Is just the way you flew by it. And it didn't matter, it could have been something as simple as, hey, there was one tree that was in your direct line of vision when you flew over the top of them. So that, as far as how I grid, it all depends on, the layout of the ground. Right. But let's say I fly for a little bit in that area and I can't, I haven't seen anything. Okay, now I'm going to go out a little farther. And then I'll go out a little farther. And then if I haven't found him then that's when I start doing, the checks, my mental checks. Like, okay, maybe this deer did something really weird. And now maybe we do have to go search that 700 yards back to the truck, because maybe he made a loop and he's heading that way. And that's kind of how it goes. But if, let's say I go there, I find him, everyone's, oh, okay, that's deer. And the thing is I can confirm 9 times out of 10, I can confirm shot placement when I punch in on that deer.
Because when you find them, you can get close, and the camera on your equipment's good enough to where even at night, because you got a light on it, and you don't really use the light. A lot of people, think that drones harass deer. They really don't, from my experience at all. And once you find them, once you kind of have that suspicion that he's dead, that's the only time you get down close enough to them to disturb anything and maybe put the light on them. So
yeah, and we've done it. Honestly, I've found numerous deer that, I find them, they're in their bed, they're still alive, they're kind of doing the old head bob, and I've had a client say, I don't think that's my deer. I'm like, all right, well, hang on. So I will drop the drone, down to as far as I feel like I can get that puppy, and I will hit him with that spotlight. And I will tell you, there is not a deer out there that is going to let you hit them with the lumens that I have on that spotlight.
Unless it is injured or,
if
sorts.
It's not an injured deer,
they're up and out of there.
Running.
Yep.
But if it's an injured deer, they will literally just look at you. They have no care in the world. It's almost like they're stunned, and that's when I know they are a vitally hit deer. Even a shoulder shot deer, a lot of times, I find them, they're standing there, they got, that one leg's just kind of held up. They're still they got 3 legs. they're still gonna move, and
they might not sprint, but they'll
right. You'll
be able to tell.
I hit them with the spotlight.
Right.
But a vitally shot deer, and there's no keeping it quiet. That drone is a big drone. It is not, when it is right next to you and up to about 80 feet, you can hear it plain as day. You can hear it when it's way out there. And deer hear better than we do. So when I bring that drone down from 300, feet down to 100, and that deer doesn't move, that deer is not feeling good.
Right. So I know you got stuff to do. I'm going to try to wrap this up, but I think we went over a lot of good stuff, and you're a wealth of knowledge when it comes to drones and deer and stuff like that. So maybe just let the listeners know kind of where you're located, stuff specifically about LTL, what your plans are maybe like for this year or in the future, where you see this going personally and in the space in general quickly. And then we'll shout out your channel so they can kind of check you out before you wrap it up.
For sure. So I'm actually, it sounds weird, but I'm based out of Northern Illinois, right around the Rockford area. I do all my tracks in Wisconsin because it is yet to be legal in Illinois. We're waiting for that. But I literally offer services all over Wisconsin. I won't turn a track down. If you call me up and you're 3.5 hours away, I'm coming to that spot. Unless it just doesn't make sense where I have numerous tracks on top of it. But I mean, I've done tracks to Appleton, to Manitowoc, to Phillips, Wisconsin, up by Minocqua, over to La Crosse. I've done them all over the state. So definitely, I'm on Google. You type my LTL drone deer recovery into Google, it pops up. My phone number's on there. I also run Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. All of those social media platforms, you can also find my stuff on there. I post pretty regularly. Easiest way though is just to either text me or call me, or on those social media platforms, just shoot me a message. I have my phone on me constantly. It's the name of the game. And like I said, you are always, if you call me and for some reason I can't get to you, I will have a contact in my phone that will get to you within a reasonable amount of time and help you out. That's never been a thing. As far as the future goes, I got something cooking on the back burner. Actually, funny thing is the guy that got me into this, filming stuff, I have just had a few conversations with him. It is not locked in, but I'm pretty much 98% it's locked in. I will have another drone operator this year. So we will have 2 guys operating under the company this year, myself and my buddy included. And he is going to be just as if you called me out to the track. He has hunted for 35, 36 years, very knowledgeable, shoots a lot of big deer. And he is a great guy. He owns a very successful business back home, knows a lot of people. So I'm hoping that bringing him on is just going to really take this thing off. That's my whole plan with this is I don't need to get it to 10 employees or anything like that. That's not the goal. Like I said from the beginning, my goal is to find your deer and watch my success rates climb. The only thing in the back of my head is if I bring him on and then Illinois opens, then I have another source of income down here in Illinois with me operating, keep him up in Wisconsin, and he is centrally located. He'll be in Appleton area, so he can hit a lot of the state without having to travel too far. And people have asked me, what's the main point in this? Main point is we got to have people covering a lot of areas, and during the rut and things like that, if I get stacked with a lot of calls in a night, we can split them up and still offer that service to you guys without having to turn you away. Because I hate getting calls from buddies or family friends or people that know me from
And you got to turn them down just because you're just so swamped.
I can't get to them, and the reason they came to me is because they wanted me there. And that's kind of, we want to diminish that. Nothing against the other drone operators. I don't want to have a huge competition, but you get the people that mean something to you. We want to help those people out before they go find somebody that's random and they have no idea who they're dealing with. So anyways, that's what's on the back burner right now. We'll have more updates here in the next month or so. We're hoping to get that off and running. And that'll just be another avenue for you guys to really be successful this fall. Like I tell everybody, I hope you don't have to call me. Hopefully your shots are good and you can find your deer, and I'll be just as happy for you. But if needed, I'm definitely around, and we'll be running literally from middle of September all the way till season closes. So
cool. So everybody listening, Aaron, you know your stuff. They can reach out to you, like you said. You guys, I think you post some recoveries if people just want to see that, how you go about things on your social media. Follow that at your personal or LTL drone recovery. You're in Illinois, but very close to Wisconsin. So anybody in or around Wisconsin that needs help or has questions, just reach out to Aaron, and I'm sure he's more than willing to answer your questions.
Yep, for sure.
All right. I'll link all your stuff in the bio of this episode. I appreciate you spending some time with me. I'll let you get out and about, do your trail camera stuff, and if I don't talk to you, good luck this year.
Sounds good. I appreciate you having me on.
absolutely. Have a good one, buddy.
Thanks, you too.